Hey everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to crochet Spice Paw the pumpkin cat. This whimsical cat pumpkin fills fall with enchantment. Her playful spirit and soothing purr make her an ideal friend for chilly evenings. So Spice Paw can be made in sport, DK, or plush weight yarn by adjusting your hook size. Today I'll be crocheting with worsted weight yarn and a 5mm crochet hook. If you haven't already, be sure to snag the matching greeting card to make an adorable and one-of-a-kind gift that your friends and family will love. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so first up we're going to be making the body and head, and we're going to be using this orange colored yarn, and we need to start by forming a magic ring. So let's do a quick review on how to get that magic ring formed and how to make our first few single crochet stitches inside. Alright, so let's review how to form a magic ring. So we're going to start by taking a little length of our yarn, and I'm using white for this demonstration. Make sure you're using the correct color for the pattern that you are following along with. So I'm going to take this white, and I'm going to reserve myself a little bit of a tail. So I'm going to take the end of that yarn, and I'm going to stretch it so I've got about 5 inches or so of a tail. And the tail is going to be the end that is not attached to our ball of yarn. So once we've got about 5 inches or so reserved of that tail, we're going to take our yarn hand. For me, that's my left hand, but if you're a left-handed crocheter, this might be your right hand. But we're going to take our yarn hand and make a bit of a finger guns here. So my index and my middle finger, I'm going to put them together, and I'm going to be looking at the inside of them. Then I'm going to take that tail that I've reserved, that 5 inches, and I'm going to lay it so that it's over the lower digit on my index and my middle. And then I'll take my thumb and I'm going to press the yarn to those 2 fingers. Then I'm going to take my hook hand, which is for me my right hand, but could be your left hand, and I'm going to grab the working yarn. Once I've got that grabbed, I'll take it and I'm going to wrap it around the back side of my index and my middle finger so that it's sort of close to that top digit. I'll flip my hand over so you can see. So I want it to be close to my top digit, so you can see it's closer to the 2 tops of my fingers here. So we're going to wrap that around, and then once we've got it around the top digit of those 2 fingers, we're going to bring it so that it goes behind our thumb again. So I use my thumb and I pinch that second wrap in place. Then we're going to keep wrapping, this time going around the lower digit on our 2 fingers. So I'll flip my hand over so you can see these 2 wraps here. This is that one I just made, going around that lower digit. So we'll wrap around that lower digit, and then we're going to take our working yarn and one more time snug it behind our thumb, and then just pull it out of our way. So once we've done that, we should have 2 wraps and this sort of X shape on the insides of our hands. So once we have all of the yarn wrapped around our yarn hand here, we're ready to take our crochet hook in our hook hand, and we're going to flip our yarn hand over so that we're looking at the back side of our fingers. So we should have 2 wraps, one around the top digit, one around the lower digit on our yarn hand. We're going to take our hook and slip it underneath that top wrap, and then use the hook part to snag that lower wrap and bring it underneath the top wrap. Then we're going to take both of our hands and we're going to flip them over so that we're looking at the inside and away from our body. So I'm flipping out and away from my body. And then I'm going to bring my 2 hands together, so my yarn hand and my hook hand. I'm going to bring them so the index finger here on my hook hand can touch the back side of my yarn hand. Then using the thumb and index finger of my hook hand, I'm going to grab both the wrap on my hook and the wrap still on my fingers right where they meet. So I'm going to kind of snag the 2 of them together right there. Once I've got those pinched between my thumb and index finger on my hook hand, I can let go with my thumb and then gently slide those wraps off of my index and middle finger. So now that I've done that, let's locate both the tail, that's the end that's no longer attached to our ball of yarn, so it's got this blunt cut end on it. And we're going to kind of pull that over into the 12 o'clock position, so kind of up and away. And then let's locate the working yarn. That's the stuff still attached to our ball of yarn. So once we've got those two identified, we're going to take the working yarn and begin tensioning it. So to do that, we'll take our index finger on our yarn hand. That for me is my left hand. Could be your right hand for you if you're a left-handed crocheter. And we're going to slip the working yarn over the top of our index finger. Then we'll take our middle, ring, and pinky finger on our yarn hand, and we're going to wrap those around that working yarn. Once you've done that, we also need to sandwich this working yarn in between our magic ring and our tail. So to do that, I like to take my middle finger and thumb on my yarn hand, and I'm going to grab that tail with my middle finger here. And then with my thumb, I want to grab the ring. So we don't want to grab our working yarn, which is kind of going in through that ring. We want to just get the bottom end of the ring here. And once you've got those two, we're going to kind of pinch them together. And you can see that sandwiches our working yarn in between the two of them. Once we've got those grabbed with our yarn hand, we can let go with our index and thumb on our hook hand. And the ring here that's on our hook is really loose. We'll tighten that by pulling our index finger up and away. You can see how that tightens that yarn. And then once we've done that, we're ready to yarn over and draw through the loop on our hook. So we'll take our hook, put the yarn over our hook. So I kind of just swing around the back side there and grab it. And we're going to pull that working yarn directly through the loop on our hook. Once we've done that, you can let go. It's not going to come undone. It won't come untied, which is very comforting because we've spent all this time creating it. The last thing we need to do before we're ready to begin is we're going to take the tail, and you can see it's threaded through our magic ring. We're going to take that tail and we're going to pull it out from the center of that ring. And from here, we're ready to begin working in the magic ring. We also need to work over the tail as well. So we'll take that ring and we'll take the tail and we're going to set them together so that we are working over both of these strands, the ring and the tail. All right, you are ready to go ahead and continue on in your pattern. All right, so now that we have our magic ring tied, we're ready to start in on round 1. And round 1, we need to put 8 single crochet stitches inside of this magic ring. So we're going to be working in the ring itself and then also over the tail that we used to tie the ring. So we've got our yarn, our working yarn tensioned here on our yarn hand and ready to start by putting our first single crochet stitch inside of this ring. So I like to take the index finger here on my hook hand and hold the loop on my hook as I take my hook and pass it through that ring and underneath the tail that I used to tie it. Then I need to yarn under, so I'm going to put the yarn underneath my crochet hook. You can see I'm kind of flipping my hook over too so I can grab that yarn with my crochet hook. And I'm going to draw that yarn through the ring and over the tail and up into a nice tall loop on my crochet hook. Then I'm going to take my index finger, put it on both of those loops there, and then yarn over, so put the yarn over my crochet hook. And then use that hook to draw that yarn through those 2 loops left on my crochet hook. And that forms our first single crochet stitch. We also want to mark this stitch, so if you kind of turn it, rotate it so you're looking at the top part here, we're going to mark this stitch by sliding a stitch marker underneath both sides of that little V shape that our stitch forms. Alright, so I have my stitch marker. I'm going to take it and just slide it underneath both sides of that stitch and then lock it so that it stays in place. And that's our first single crochet stitch. We need 8 total, so I'm going to continue adding single crochet stitches to this magic ring until I have 7 more, which will give me 8. So again, holding onto that loop on our hook, going through the ring, yarning under and drawing up a nice tall loop, then yarning over and drawing through both. There's my second single crochet stitch, Here's my third. Four. Five. Six. 7. And 8. And when you have all 8 of your single crochet stitches, which is all the ones that we need for round 1, we're ready to do the magic part of our magic ring. So we're going to hold on to that last stitch that we made, and we're going to take this tail that we've been crocheting over and pull tightly to close that round into a round, and that takes the stitch that we just made and puts it right next to the first stitch that we made. Which is great because round 2 we're going to be increasing in this first stitch and then all the stitches all the way around. So let's go ahead and start round 2. We're going to take our stitch marker out and we're going to place an increase inside of that stitch that we just had the marker in. So to single crochet inside of a single crochet stitch, we'll push our hook from front to back underneath both sides of that little V shape. And then from here it's just like how we made our single crochet stitches in our magic ring. We'll yarn under, draw up a nice tall loop, and yarn over, draw through both, and then mark that stitch that we just made. We always want to mark that first stitch. It helps us keep track of what round we're on. Alright, so there's our first single crochet stitch. To make the rest of our increase, we need to place a second single crochet stitch in that same stitch from round 1. So you can see my stitch kind of coming out of that first stitch. We're going to go back through that same hole. So just push your hook right back through, yarn under, draw up a loop, and yarn over and draw through both. You can see we have these two V shapes coming out of the same hole from the previous round. That's an increase. We're going to keep increasing in each stitch all the way around, which will give us 16 stitches total at the end of round 2. So we're ready to move on to our next single crochet stitch. So here's our next stitch. I'll push through from front to back. Make a second single crochet stitch in that stitch from the previous round. And I'm just going to keep increasing until I have put 2 single crochet stitches in each stitch from round 1. Alright, so I'm all the way around. Before I move on to round 3, I'm going to give my magic ringtail one final pretty tight tug. You can see that completely closes off that first round. Then I'm going to flip my work over and I'm going to trim this magic ringtail short, but not all the way off. So I'm just going to give it a trim. And I'm going to discard what I trimmed. That's going to keep the magic ring's tail out of our way as we keep working around in our pattern. Okay, that sets us up for round 3. So round 3 we have some parentheses, and if you look just outside of them there's a multiplication sign and the number 8. That's telling us that we need to repeat everything inside of those parentheses in the order that it appears, the amount of times, in this case 8, and that will give us 24 stitches total. So let's start with one time of that parentheses pattern. We'll take our stitch marker out, and then in that stitch it was just in, we're going to put 1 single crochet stitch. Then mark that stitch. So there's the first half of those parentheses. Then in the next stitch of the round we'll put 1 increase, which is 2 single crochet stitches in the same stitch from the previous round. And that's everything inside of those parentheses one time. We need to repeat that another 7 times, so we have 8 repetitions total. So in the next stitch of the round, we'll put 1 single crochet stitch. In the stitch after, we'll put 1 increase. That's my second repetition. So I'm just going to keep repeating that pattern. 1 single crochet stitch, 1 increase, until I am all the way around for round 3. Alright, so I just put my last increase in for round 3, and I'm ready for round 4. So round 4, we just need to put 1 single crochet stitch in each of the 24 stitches we created from round 3. So that's just 1 stitch in each of the stitches from the previous round. So don't forget our first stitch, we need to put our stitch marker back in. And then just 1 single crochet stitch per stitch all the way around. Okay, that's round 4 done for me. Round 5, we've got a new parentheses pattern to repeat. We're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 5 stitches of our round. So there's my first single crochet stitch. I marked it already. 2 single crochet stitches, 3, 4, 5, and then we'll put 1 increase. And we're going to repeat that pattern 3 more times for a total of 4 repetitions. So 5 single crochet stitches, Alright, so there's that last increase, and I'm ready for rounds 6 through 9. So for rounds 6 through 9, we're going to just be putting 1 single crochet stitch in each stitch all the way around. So don't forget, as you start each new round, to take your stitch marker out, make your first stitch, and then remark that first stitch, and do that for each round, so you keep track of where you are. So here I am starting in on round 6. I will catch you back here whenever I have finished round 20. I'll catch you back here whenever I have finished round 9 and we're ready to move on to round 10 together. Alright, so I just made the last single crochet stitch in round 9. And before I move on to round 10, I wanted to point it out, there's a small chance your work has been working inside out. So a pretty good tell is that your magic ring tail is on the outside of your work. And then your stitches have this line that runs through them. It's easy to fix. You can just flip your work right side out, inside in. And then we're going to continue on with this on the outside as we finish up the pattern. Alright, so we're ready for round 10. Round 10, we're going to start by putting 1 single crochet stitch in the next 9 stitches of our round. So there's my first. Once you've got all 9 of your single crochet stitches, we're going to place an increase in the next 3 stitches. So 3 increases back to back. And again, remember, an increase is when we put 2 single crochet stitches in the same place. So there's my second increase. Alright, there are all 3 of my increases there. Then we're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 5 stitches. There are those 5 single crochet stitches. Then another 3 increases back to back. Alright, there are my 3 increases, and then 1 single crochet stitch in the remaining 8 stitches of our round. Okay, that wraps up round 10. So for rounds 11 through 13, just like we did with rounds 6 through 9, we're going to be putting 1 single crochet stitch in each stitch that we created in round 10. So don't forget to take your stitch marker out as you start each new round, and I will see you back here whenever I have the last single crochet stitch from round 13, and we're ready to get the safety eyes placed. Alright, so I just finished the last single crochet stitch there in round 13, and I'm ready to go ahead and get the safety eyes placed. So I'm going to take this loop here on my crochet hook, and I'm going to pull it long, and then take my crochet hook out. And then from here I'm going to take my work and I'm going to flip it over so that loop is at the back. I'm looking here at the front of my piece, and then we added those increases in round 10. We're going to want to center the face between where those 2 increases are. So you can see how it sort of flares out right here on the face. Our eyes are going to be centered between those 2 flares that we have. So I'm going to go ahead and take my first safety eye, and a quick note, if this is going to be for a small child or for a pet, you may want to embroider the eyes on instead, but if not, you're good to use safety eyes just like I am. And our safety eyes are going to be centered between those increases and are going to be in the space between rounds 9 and 10. So starting at the top, I'm going to count down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and it's the space between round 9 and round 10. So I'm going to place my first safety eye over here on the left hand side, close to where that first flare is. And then the safety eyes are about 3 stitches apart, so I'm going to count over 1, 2, 3 stitches and then place my second safety eye in between the space between rounds. So if you're happy with the placement, these look pretty good to me. You can go ahead and snap the backs on. If not, you can kind of move the eyes around a little bit, closer together, further apart, higher or lower. Just remember we need to embroider on some face details as well. Once you've got the safety eyes where you'd like though, you can go ahead and take the little backs that come with them and push them down onto the stem of your safety eye. And it'll click in place. I'll repeat on the other safety eye. And that gets them on and attached. And we can go ahead and continue on in our pattern. So we'll flip our work back over, insert our hook back into that loop, and pull our working yarn to draw it back down. And ready to go ahead and start in on round 14. We've got a new parentheses pattern here, starting with 1 single crochet stitch in the first stitch of our round. And then we need to make a DEC or a decrease. So the way we're going to decrease, we'll take our crochet hook and go through our next single crochet stitch, yarn under and draw up a loop. Then do that same thing in the next stitch. So go through, yarn under and draw up a loop. And then from here we're going to yarn over and draw through all 3 of the loops left on our hook. And that's how you'll make a decrease. So then we need to repeat that parentheses pattern of 1 single crochet decrease another 10 times, and that's going to take us all the way to the last stitch of our round. So 1 single crochet stitch, 1 decrease, Alright, so I'm at that last stitch of the round. I'm going to put one single crochet stitch inside. And we're ready for round 15. We're going to put one decrease in the next 11 stitches. So there's my first decrease. Alright, there are my 11 decreases. I'll put one single crochet stitch in the last stitch of the round. And then before I make my last round, which is round 16, I'm going to add some stuffing to the inside of the body here. So I'll take my hook and just like I did with the safety eyes, draw that loop up long, take my hook out, and we're going to push some stuffing to the inside of the body at this point. Alright, so I have the body stuffed. I'm ready to go ahead and make that last round. So I'll reinsert my hook, draw it down long. And I'm ready for round 16, which is my last round. I'm going to decrease in each stitch all the way around. Alright, so I went ahead and decreased in each stitch all the way around. I'm going to fasten off by taking my stitch marker out, and I'm going to slip stitch in the stitch that I was just in. So I'll go through, yarn under, draw up a loop, and then draw that loop I just made through the only other loop left on my hook. And then we need a long tail to sew with because we're going to use it to sew this last round closed, but then also to give the pumpkin a little shape. So reserve yourself, I would say probably 24 inches just because I hate running out and I'd rather have a lot to discard than have to reattach. Alright, once you've got your working yarn cut, we can take our crochet hook and that slip stitch that's on it, we're going to pull it until our tail passes through as well, and then tighten down. Then we'll take the end of that tail that we've cut and we need to thread it through the eye of our tapestry needle. Alright, so now that I have the tail threaded through my needle, I'm going to sew through the front loop of each of these 6 stitches left. So to do the front loop only, when we've been crocheting, we've been passing through both. So you can see I've got them both here on my crochet hook, and I've got them kind of separated. The front loop is the one closest to the front of our work. So we're going to be slipping our needle up and in between those two parts of the stitch, getting just the front loop. And we're going to be working around this direction. So we're going to be starting directly to this side of our slip knot. We'll slip up between, pull our tail all the way through, rotate, sew up between, pull the tail all the way through. Alright, once you've sewn through all 6 of those front loops, we're going to pull to cinch that round closed. Then we also need to tie a knot to secure that cinch. So I'm going to take my working yarn and I'm going to loop it over my work in sort of an O shape. Snag a little bit of the fabric of that last stitch I sewed through, and then sew up inside of that O shape that I've made. And by pulling, that O shape's going to wrap itself around our sewing yarn, tying a knot. Alright, so now we are ready to add some of the pumpkin's cinches here, and we're going to do that with this tail that we've left really long. So let's start by sending it straight up through where we cinched closed, and then up through the center of that magic ring. And then we're going to be adding sections to our pumpkin by first cinching sort of to the outside of this eye. So kind of bring this tail down and along, and then sew back down through where we cinched closed, and up through the magic ring at the top. And then we're going to pull this stitch. So I want mine to be just to the outside of those increases that we made. Pull the stitch to sort of cinch it into a pumpkin shape. Then we're going to repeat over here on this other side of the other eye. Again, pulling tight to sort of cinch. And then we'll add 2 more cinches here along the back side of the pumpkin. And then 1 more cinch along the back here. You can see that adds that shape to our pumpkin, gives it sort of those little wedges. And we're ready to go ahead and fasten this yarn off completely, so I'm going to take it and send it out to one of those wedges. And then I'm going to tie another surface knot over here, so make another little ring. So up through some of the fabric of your work and up through that ring to tie a knot. And then we're going to weave this in through a random stitch across the way on the body, and then just pull. We can unthread our needle, and by pulling that tail tight and cutting close to the fabric of our work, we weave the remainder in, which we can discard. And that is the head done. Alright, next up are the ears, so I'll walk you through how to make the first, and then you'll need to come back, make a second, and we'll get them attached together. Starting with the same orange color we used for the head, we're going to form another magic ring. Alright, so now that we have that magic ring formed, we're ready for round 1, which is to put 4 single crochet stitches inside of this magic ring. And since there are only 2 rounds, I'm not going to be marking my first single crochet stitch here. So there's my first, second, third, and fourth. I'll pull the tail of the magic ring, which sets me up for the last round, which is to put 1 single crochet stitch in the first stitch of round 1, and then an increase in the next stitch. And repeat that a second time. So 1 single crochet stitch in the next stitch, and 1 increase in the last stitch. Alright, the ears work up pretty quick, which is really nice. Let's give that magic ring tail 1 final tug. And then in the first stitch of the round, so the one right next to where we're at, we're going to slip stitch. So yarn under, and then draw through. And we need to cut a tail to sew with. So 6 to 8 inches, you don't need too much. Then just like with the head and body, we're going to pull that slip stitch until the tail we cut passes through, and then tighten it down. And we can also give our magic ring tail a trim here. I like to hold it so that it comes up out of the ear, and then just trim it short, but not all the way off. Alright, so that is one of the ears done. Let's get the second ear crocheted, and then we can attach them to the body. Alright, I have both of the ears crocheted and I'm ready to sew them on. So I'm going to take the tail from one of the ears, get it threaded through my tapestry needle. Alright, so the ears are sewn onto rounds 4 and 6 of the head, or onto the wedge here at the back side. So I'm going to be attaching my ears on the front part of the head, closer to the eyes, but the pattern recommends having them on these back wedges, but I like them to be a little closer to the eyes. I think it looks cuter. But they're attached the same way regardless of where you place them. So I'm going to put my first ear here on the front wedge closest to where the eyeballs are, and then centered in between, like right where the eye is. And to attach, we're going to take our needle, grab some fabric from the head and some fabric from the stitch of one of the stitches on the last round we crocheted. And we're just going to rotate all the way around, catching each stitch, so there's 6 of them there on that last round. until we've sewn all the way around on each ear. Alright, so I've sewn all the way around on that first ear and I'm ready to fasten off. I'm going to do that by tying another surface knot. And then I'll weave it into the inside of the head and out through a random stitch. Unthread my needle, and then give that tail a trim. Discard what I didn't weave in. And you can see that is one of the ears attached. So let's repeat on the other side with the other ear. Alright, so I have both ears sewn on and I'm ready to go ahead and add some of the face details. So we're going to be starting with black, and we need to add the nose first. So I went ahead and threaded my tapestry needle with some black worsted weight yarn. You can also use embroidery thread. I'm going to be using worsted weight yarn for this though. So then I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to send it up through the space between stitches. So be really careful not to snag any of the fabric of your work. Grab just some of the space between. And then we're going to sew up through the space between rounds 9 and 10, which is where our safety eyes are. And I'm going to start a little closer here to this eye on this side. And we pull our yarn through, we want to leave a tail on the outside because we're going to be coming back and tying our working sewing yarn to this. So don't pull too much of your yarn through. Alright, so I'm going to start by sewing a straight stitch across between these two eyes. I'm going to come up in the space underneath the round just below where I'm sewing this first stitch, and then centered in the middle of that stitch. And then I'm going to sew up to the corner here and then back through that same stitch I came up through. Oops. And then repeat by doing that on the other corner. So I have like an empty triangle here. I'm going to sew 2 stitches to fill that. So one here. And then one last one. I'm going to come back up through again that same stitch that I've been coming up through this whole time. You can see that fills in the nose and gives us a nice triangle. And then we're going to sew a straight stitch down underneath the nose here to form the mouth. So I'm just going to go to the next row underneath, so 1 straight stitch. And we'll also add the whiskers on with this as well. So let's bring our needle out through some of the stitches on this side of the face. So that long straight stitch underneath adds the mouth, and the whiskers are going to be sewn sort of at an angle. So here's my first one, and then my second whisker. I'll just go straight out for it, and then go across the way. We'll sew the other whiskers on as well. So we'll sew up, and then over, and then come up through that space that we went down through. Mine's right underneath my whisker. So those are the whiskers attached. I'll unthread my needle, and then I'm going to tie these 2 ends together in a square knot. Then we'll cut them short. And to hide them inside of our work, we'll lift our work up next to where that knot is, which is going to send it to the inside of our pattern. You can also push with your needle to send it to the inside. face detail we need to add are the whites around the outsides of the eyes. So let's get some white. I'm going to be using worsted weight yarn. And just like we did with the black, send the white up through some space between stitches and then come up on the underside of the eye. And don't put all of the white through the little tail on the outside. Then we'll run some white around the outsides of each of the eyes. You can see that adds the white detail on the outside of the eyes. I'll unthread, and we can tie these two tails together. Trim them short, and then use our needle to pull our work above and push that knot to the inside. Alright, last thing we need to add are the black details on the ears. So I'm again going to be working with some black worsted weight yarn. I'm going to start by sending my needle in between the spaces of stitches and then up through the very tippy top of the first ear. Leave a tail on the outside. I'm going to sew a stitch down along the kind of outside corner of the ear. And then I'm going to sew back up. So we're sort of making like the inset of the ear. Then I'm going to run my needle along and go to the other ear. You can see that adds that sort of triangle shape to this ear. We're going to do the same thing on this side. And this time sew all the way back to where we came up through. Adds that little detail to the ears. Can unthread our tapestry needle, tie these two tails together. Then pull that knot to the inside. And that wraps up the face details, so let's move on to the next part of our pattern. Alright, last we need to make the tail. We're going to be using this black colored yarn, beginning by forming another magic ring. And then for round 1, we need to put 5 single crochet stitches inside of that magic ring. Alright, when we have all 5 of our single crochet stitches, we can pull the tail. Then rounds 2 through 10, we need to put 1 single crochet stitch in each stitch all the way around. So don't forget to remark the beginning of each round as you go. I'll see you back here whenever I have finished round 10 and we're ready for round 11. Alright, so I'm ready for round 11, which is the last round of our tail, and we're just going to be putting 1 single crochet stitch all the way around, so that's 5 single crochet stitches. And then slip stitching to the first stitch of the round. And then we need to leave a long tail because we're going to use that to sew the tail to the body, so 6 to 8 inches ought to do the trick. Alright, I'm going to pull that last slip stitch through. And then tighten down. And then I'm going to take some of my craft wire. I've taken some black craft wire here and sort of twisted it around itself. I'm going to insert that into the tail itself. And then we're ready to get it attached. So I'm going to take that tail, thread my tapestry needle with it, and we're going to sew it so that it's in the cinches here at the center of our pumpkin. So I'm going to start by Sewing through some of the fabric of the pumpkin. And then sew up through one of those last single crochet stitches. Grab some more of the fabric of the pumpkin. Alright, so I've sewn it all the way around. I'm going to make sure that my tail is coming out of the fabric of the body and is really close to where the fabric of the black tail is. Tie a surface knot. So I'm snagging some of the fabric of the body here. And then I'll weave that into a random stitch here on the body and out through any old place. And then unthread my needle and trim the excess. And since we added a little bit of craft wire, we can shape the tail so that it sort of curves. I'm going to give mine a nice curve here. And with that tail shaped, that wraps up Spice Paw the Pumpkin Cat's tutorial.